now you guys, all the technical things are up and running. You guys should be able to see us and hear us both. Sorry about that. But so just for those of you who don't know it, I'm playing on Sunday at noon Eastern time my second adoption match against Alessia, one and only Alessia Santeramo, who is going in the end, since I was a traitor to Wholesome Tomatoes. Last time there was a sub battle, or let me put it this way, Alessia was desperate, she was just swindled me into participating. I promised Anna that we're gonna see that performance from Alessia on my channel on Sunday at noon New York time. So anyway.
Thanks for that, Nikola. Thank you for
Yes.
the compensation for winning a
Sure.
game for Alessia, tying the score and making it possible for her to make a comeback. That was thanks to your game, and you played really well that final game.
Thank you. I would, I apologize. Again, I apologize for that performance, but what can you do? Anyway, all right.
It's all right. It's all right.
So, I'm very much looking forward to this game. So, Anna, I'm looking at the analysis board and I am a little bit anxious because I have no idea what Anna has prepared.
I have prepared another game by one of the top chess grandmasters in the world. We have looked at a lot of games from previous world champions, former world champions. That was also, of course, always the case of going back in chess history. Nikola knows a lot about chess history.
Yep.
But since we have taken quite many of our lessons as a time travel, I thought we're going to come back to modern times and look at the games or a game by someone who hasn't become a world champion yet, but he was very close to it and he may still do it. And his name is Fabiano Caruana, world number 2. He was really close to beating Magnus Carlsen at the World Championship match in 2018, and hopefully he will get another chance if he wins the candidates in the future. For now, we're gonna take a look at the game where he didn't do too well. It's a game where I hope to teach Nikola and the viewers about complex positions where things can also go out of control in a way that you may end up being in a somewhat worse position, and how you can find your way back into the game, how you can keep the game complex, find chances until the opponent also cracks and you eventually turn the tables. This is
Okay.
going to be today's lesson.
Sounds interesting. And just before we proceed, I want to give a quick shout out to Adip to 147, Templar Killer 500, Vestgen 1983, and Filator 1726 for the follows. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for the support. We're gonna start by going through the opening, but it's not that important. The opening stage is simply just to know how we ended up in the position that we're gonna be observing. Fabiano playing with the black pieces, so if you want, Nikola, you can flip the board, even if sometimes we will still need to flip it back.
That board will be flipped plenty of times. And a quick shout out to Wilco0103. Thank you for the follow. Greatly appreciated. And do we get to know who is the opponent?
Yeah, I can reveal that because it's not one of the very well-known games. I chose a game from the Pro Chess League, this year's Pro Chess League. Caruana with the black pieces against Moranda, Wojciech Moranda.
Okay, nice.
So with the black pieces, this is the world number 2, but in a situation where he is the higher rated player, kind of a must-win situation for board ones of the Pro Chess League. If you are one of the top players such as Caruana, Nakamura, you try to win your games with both colors. So there's no such thing as a draw is good, because at every Pro Chess League there are 4 games, 2 of them with the white pieces, 2 of them with the black pieces, and the top grandmasters always try with both colors to do something. It's not always easy. That's why we see knight c6. That's not the usual opening of Fabiano, and now bishop b4 check, just changing a little bit the move order and trying to stir the game into newer territories.
Okay.
d5, bishop g2, castle, castle. Now, I know this is a very random position, but if you had this position with the black pieces, Nikola, how would you try to develop your pieces?
Okay, so here are a couple of things. And at Dip to 147, I'm a big supporter of Anna, as all you guys know, and I'm her student. I'm also a big supporter of Alessia, so it's very hard for me to pick up the team. Sometimes you have to pick somebody, and Alessia really needed somebody to play with that strength. So what can you do?
Yeah,
Anyway,
Adipto, that's not a nice thing to say.
no,
And
it's fine.
Nikola has been supporting me from the very beginning of my Twitch channels. So please don't even
No, no,
think
it's fine.
that there's anything along that line. We just joke about how
No,
Nikola
it's
has
fine.
gone to the other side, but he has always been supporting me and my channel too.
That's fine. I got the same when I played for Anna against Alexandra Botta's team and so on. And just a big shout out to my dear friend and fellow streamer Julian Landau. So let me just give him a quick shout out. And so please give him a follow and a quick shout out, and there you go. And Henrik KDZ, very good to see you. Thank you for being here. All right, going back to the position. This is, I don't even know how to, no apologies necessary, Adipto. We all have strong feelings about teams we play for. I can completely relate. Thank you. So this is a very interesting position. I'm a little bit surprised to see the knight on c6. That's interesting choice. Bishop on b4 is, I guess, perfectly fine. I don't even know what opening this is. East Indian defense, I guess. That's what the computer says. Okay, fine. Whatever.
Anti-Nimzo Indian variation of the East Indian. Yeah, I wouldn't have known the name either.
No. Hey, Chicken Morales, thank you for being here. That's very greatly appreciated. Thank you. All right, so here is the thing. The knight is on. So how would they evaluate position? We have a problem of developing the bishop on c8. It's DNA 2006 TG. It's Wojciech Miranda, right? Who is the white? It was played in a Pro Chess League, and black is Fabiano. So we have a problem with that bishop. White has a slight advantage in space. I don't want to say that this bishop, the knight on c6 is misplaced, but we can't play the normal c5 thing. We also, we can, the bishop on b4 is a little bit out of place now that white has castled. I think white's idea here would be at some point to push e4. And I mean, this position is within reasonable equality, I would say.
Yes. So if you already have identified the c8 bishop as a problem piece that we will need to find a way to develop that bishop, what are some of the ways that come to mind?
Well, we can try to push e5 ourselves. So that's one option. Another option is to borrow from Queen's Gambit, which this kind of resembles, though bishop on g2 doesn't really allow it, and play b6 and then bishop on a6 or bishop on b7. That's another option. And that's, I don't see any other plans for black, to be very frank with you. The question here is, does black have time to do that? Some opportunity of combating e4 and then e5 would probably, yeah. I that's about all I can think of in terms of plans, and unfortunately.
Sure, there aren't too many more options. So which one would you try to go for if you play this with the black pieces?
Well, e5 might be a little bit committal because we have it that, we can't play it immediately. We would have to put bishop on d6. We also don't want to allow c5, which incidentally kind of works in this position, which normally it doesn't. Another option is to basically, I don't know. I don't want to suspend our pawn from central. I don't exchange our central pawn and play dc4 and then knight d5 and so on and so forth. It's okay. So, hey, Luna Jazz, thank you for the follow. That's very greatly appreciated. All right, so the thing is, can we even play something along the lines of b6 right now? We probably cannot.
Why not?
Because then white can exchange on d5, push e4 immediately, and not. Depends on if are we trying to maintain this d5 pawn, which I think we have to. I just don't necessarily like this, this diagonal being opened anymore. Okay. So long-term plan is maybe to play knight e7. And then maybe then play c5. And then play b6. Another option is to maintain this d5 pawn here, and then push b6 and then bishop to a6. Yet, and I kind of like that plan, Anna, to be very honest with you. I mean, I don't think there is a possibility of b4 a bishop being trapped, because we can always exchange it here, but let's assume that at knight it's here, then c5 would be a little bit troublesome. Because I don't think we would have time to withdraw the bishop before it dies. Vessia 1983, I am 1970 on Blitz and Lichess, I'm 2150 on Rapid on Lichess. So my USCF rating is 1597, but that's based on only 3 games. So I think I'm somewhere between 1900 and 2000 for what that's worth. So, okay, so let's look at some concrete variations here. We can take on c4, but that allows e4, immediate e4. And, and then with this, we kind of need to maintain this pawn to block this diagonal. At least that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
If we maintain it, then we can play b6. So, immediately here immediate plan is probably we can play b6 immediately, I think. And my educated guess, based on what I know about Fabiano's style, is that that's something he probably played.
Yes, correct. And I loved your reasoning, how you went through the different options and how to execute each. And b6 with the idea of keeping the d5 pawn where it is, keeping the long diagonal closed. At least if white takes, it also opens up the diagonal of this bishop, although we already have push b6, so it's committal.
Yep.
But black still has to finish development and equalize. This is a slightly better position for white, where we need to get our pieces off of the back rank as a first step. So very good job. b6 is the move.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, Sledgehammer. It's very good to see you. Yeah, this is a position, given that you're a French player, that you should be familiar with. So,
yeah, that bishop is always a pain. Queen c2 was played in the game, and now both bishop a6 and bishop b7 make sense. Fabiano has chosen bishop b7. I guess if bishop a6, one needs to take a look at the tactical opportunities, because that c6 knight is in the air. So if after c takes d5, I don't know if If
That's
black can enter this line, what would you think about this, Nikola? Your tactical intuition.
this doesn't look good for black, does it?
Yeah, no.
I
So
mean,
perhaps bishop a6, even if it doesn't lose immediately, it looks fishy.
with the 6 off, to answer your question, this event is streamed every week. It really depends on a schedule because she's really very busy. So, but there is every week there is a Nikola Learns Chess stream, and I'm gonna actually, if you join my Discord, that's where it's normally announced. So. Yeah, that doesn't look. I mean, we can go into some sort of a messiness and play knight e7, then hope to take on e2, but that's doesn't look good.
Yeah,
Doesn't.
it looks like the wrong direction. So
Yeah.
bishop b7 makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to do, get the bishop developed. a3 was played by white, and now here's of course the next question. What do we do with that bishop? Do we take on d2? Do we bring the bishop back? What would you do, Nikola?
I think if we exchange that bishop, we are going to have a whole complex of dark squares weak. Like all these squares will become weak, so I probably don't want to exchange it. The real question is, where do we put the bishop? Obviously bishop a5 would lose the bishop, so bishop d6 is, and probably the best move, right? Yeah, I would probably put the bishop back on d6. I don't see any tactical issues.
Yeah, I think with bishop d6, perhaps the one thing that the Caruana was worried about is how does it look for white if white starts pushing on the queen side, such as c5?
Well, we can just withdraw the bishop back to c7 to e7, and you know, and I'm not sure what the follow-up here is. If you're thinking in terms of b4, that's ugly. And then if you allow b5 and c6 to go through, black is going to get crushed very quickly. Yeah, so strategically here, yeah, that doesn't look good.
Yeah. So if we are worried about c5, then what do you think would be a better option?
Then we should probably have an extra save a tempo and play bishop e7, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be ideal to be able to place the bishop on d6, but because of that tempo with c5, b4, it's actually better to bring the bishop all the way back to e7 to at least give us that one move that it will take to push c5 and then b4 for white. It's a better position for white, so whether we go for bishop e7 or what Caruana played, he ended up taking on d2, but in both cases white is better. So we're gonna be here on a little bit of the passive, slightly worse side of this position. And as you said, the dark squares will be an issue here. So how can black start claiming that there's some activity, there's some play also in black's position? Because if we stay passive, it's pair of bishops for white and very comfortable position.
Okay, so that's a very good question. And it's not actually, there is not an easy answer to it.
Yeah, it's not easy.
All right. One option is to play something. The problem is that after knight a5, this is being exchanged, you know, and we are going to end up with a destroyed pawn structure.
Yeah.
Another option is to, you know, play knight e4, which is actually a pretty topical move in this position, and asking where is that bishop going. Though some sort of a sequence with bishop going on f4 and targeting that pawn is kind of unpleasant. Another option is to regroup the pieces and play knight e7, though though I'm not sure where this knight can actually go.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we really are passive, and this C file is a little tricky for us. So, and Sledgehammer is suggesting in some sort of a prophylactics that to play A5, which is actually a pretty decent move.
Mm-hmm.
Though it doesn't really prevent A4. I honestly, for my money, I would probably, I'm worried about we can do something along the lines of take on C4 and then play knight A, then open up the big diagonal for this bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And that might actually be the best option. So I really have two candidate moves. One is to take on C4, another is to play knight E4.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little concerned about this bishop being here. So what I would probably do in this position is I think actually, in all honesty, how about for this sequence? We can take on C4, Queen C4, Knight E7, and then we want to put Knight on E4 and then push C5 at some point. I'm not sure we have enough tempi to do it though.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, after we do that, then there's Rook C1, and this pawn is a little bit difficult, but we can reforce it to Rook C8. Yeah, honestly, I would take on C4 and play Knight E7.
I think that's the best line. I think that's the best option for black to try to fight for equality, as you said, to take the pawn, move the knight away, then regroup the pieces to try to push C5. And if Rook A C1, you may still, either with the move order Rook C8 or C5, then Rook C8. If this pawn is captured, what is the issue with this capture?
Should this capture is that we're going to take on F3 and then take on D2.
Yeah, and even though the rook is hanging, that would be two minor pieces for the rook and getting that light square bishop as well. So if white cannot take it, then this c5 pawn, this c5 push is very strong. We are about to liquidate the position, simplify by trading on d4, and still should be somewhat better for white, but the advantage is not as threatening and scary as it was here, where we are lacking counterplay and the option of pushing the c pawn because the knight is on c6.
Yeah. Just before we proceed, a quick shout out to Ostanovevo, who is another chess streamer. He actually, I think, probably just finished his stream. It's very good to see him. Please give him a follow, and also to WFM Devina, handle Twitch Let's Go. Please give her a follow. She's a great chess streamer as well. So, all right. So, yeah. So, yeah, so is that what was played in the game, or should I not dare ask?
I think it should have been played perhaps as the best chance for equalizing, but not the game, not in this game. 94 was played in the game, which was also mentioned by you, and a couple of you in the chat said as well, apart from 94, the option of pushing a5 just to put a pause, a hold on that queen side expansion. Exactly. So this makes sense too, but I think your line was the way to go when it comes to trying to simplify and equalize. Another part of the story, of course, is what we said, that this is the Pro Chess League where Caruana is the highest rated player. He should try to win all his games. It's a rapid game. The time control is 15 minutes with increment. So I guess he wanted to keep the position complex, even if it's worse. It's worse for black.
Okay.
After rook fd1, what shall we do next now that we have placed our knight on e4 and pushed a5?
Okay, so all right, so this is an interesting moment to make a quick pause and think a little bit. Well, this knight on c6 is definitely a little bit misplaced. So I think the plan with knight e7 is still in play. We can also channel our own internal Tal and play g5, and I'm kidding. I'm almost positive that Caruana didn't play that, and that's not even a good move, but that's a possible move. All kidding aside, we can try to play some sort of a hedgehog position. I play f5 here. But all of these pawn moves are fairly committal. I think knight e7, gets the knight to a better position, opens the possibility of taking with a knight here, if in the case white takes, and opens up this bishop to contest the diagonal. So knight e7 appears to be a good move.
Yeah, I think knight e7 is one of the main things to consider. What happens after the capture? What happens if white takes? This would be a critical moment.
Yeah,
and if this works, that's great. If it doesn't work, maybe we should look for something else.
Well, we can't take with a knight for obvious reasons, so we can either take with a bishop or we can take with a pawn. If we take with a pawn, that basically closes down the diagonal, and both g2 and b7 bishops kind of become showpieces, for better or worse. It also kind of puts the kibush, to use a New York term, on the problem with sledgehammer with knight d5 is that knight on e4 is then undefended, and
unfortunately,
and we can't really, there is no useful jump with a knight, so white can just take it. Bishop d5, on the other hand, allows for some future e4 threat. Hey, Worship, my friend, it's very good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. All right, so why don't it's actually a tough decision. I would probably take with I see no reason not to take with a pawn, and then we can put the bishop to develop on a6. Taking on a bishop may turn out to be a little bit too committal, for better or for worse. Also, we need to figure out what we're going to do with this c pawn, which is kind of on the half open line.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would probably take with a pawn.
And what happens after pawn takes? If white takes on c7, would white take with the queen? Would white take with the bishop? And do we have a good follow-up afterwards?
Well, after we take with if it takes with the bishop, we are in a little bit. We can even play rook c8. That's not a very good option. And if he takes with the queen, our problem is that pawn on b6 is in trouble. However, if we take with the bishop, what are our options? Okay. Well, we have given away that pawn either way, right?
Yeah. So do we have enough for it, or do you think this line will not work, unfortunately?
No, it won't. Okay. Yep. That basically defeats the line. Okay.
Yeah. So if we cannot do this, unfortunately, as painful as it is that this knight is on c6,
We
we'll
need to
have to
keep.
deal with
We
it.
need to keep
Yeah.
it. Yep, that's.
Yeah.
We tried.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 97 line is basically rest in peace.
Yeah. Because of the tactical motives, the e4 knight needs protection and the c7 pawn too.
Yeah.
Any other way for that knight to be activated? Can you think of any other ways?
You're talking about knight on.
C6, because that's a problematic piece right now, as we were saying.
Okay, well we can prepare 97 by playing rook c8,
Mm-hmm.
which appears passive and slow, but that's a legitimate option. Um, we can decide. I mean, in all honesty, one of the weaknesses of my game that in this situation I'll probably just play g5 and go for it. But you know, it's not a good move. But I think we can withdraw the knight to d6.
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, the positional way to handle it is to do this or to do this. And getting the knight on d6 has the advantage that pawn on c4 is then threatened.
Mm-hmm. True.
And if we exchange the bishop for the knight, white is actually, that's a very good exchange for black.
Mm-hmm.
So frankly, I think knight d6 is the move of choice here.
Yeah. Knight d6 I think is one of the options that make the most sense for just trying to see what's going to happen with those captures in the center and try to release some of the pressure. Plus, that knight on e4 wouldn't be hanging anymore. Caruana went for a different one. Once again, it's a rapid game, so that also should be taken into account. He pushes a4. It's an active-looking move. Could prepare the knight jump to a5, but I think he will still run into a very similar issue with the c7 pawn hanging after c takes d5, as well as the knight on e4. So it doesn't solve the problem, but I understand that in a rapid game, this
Yeah.
is an active looking move, so go for it, right?
Yes.
He may still have to do what you said, rook c8 and such, and then this pawn will be hanging, so you can't really go for that idea anymore. After a4, white played rook ac1. Everything looks very nice for white's setup. As for our setup, we still are struggling. This is the moment where Fabiano said, okay, I'm just gonna connect the rooks, bring maybe then the other rook to c8 if needed.
Yeah, because he can't really put the other rook because a4 pawn is hanging.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that was a committal move, a4, and I don't think it was the best one, but he's trying. He's just trying to keep the position complex. And I think what's good though about a structure like this, from Black's perspective, is that I think it looks worse. White has the pair of bishops. White's development has been really natural, healthy, while Black has issues. The c7 pawn. We are lacking the dark squared bishop, so the dark squares in general are weakened. The a4 pawn, that was a committal move. There are issues in the position, but there's nothing concrete. So in a practical sense, Black still has very good chances of equalizing or even winning, because it's not that straightforward in a game. What is it that white should do? So I was going to ask you here to flip the board, Nikola, and think of how would you proceed from white's perspective. What would be your plan?
Okay. And just a quick shout out to my dear friend Dirke. Hi Dirke, welcome to the stream. Yes, today we're a little bit earlier than usual, and of course my computer decided that it wants to do a major Windows update right now, which we're gonna snooze. But that's actually fairly typical. Okay. So I'm a white here. So the according to chess.com, this is East Indian game, East Indian defense, Nimzo, anti-Nimzo East Indian.
Yes.
To
Yeah,
be
that's the
to be
opening.
very to be very precise for what that's worth. Okay.
Mm,
All right. So what can we do here? We have as white we have more space.
yeah.
We have a very strong pair of bishops.
Mm-hmm.
Both bishops are very strong. There is that this weak pawn on c7, and that's basically already kind of threatened.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it appears that black's position here is hanging by a thread, which it does. Now, how to unravel it, it's a different story. This knight on e4 is moderately annoying. Okay, so if I'm white in this position, I have an option to exchange here
Mm-hmm.
and open this up,
Yeah.
and then maybe play knight e5, just a
Mm-hmm.
thought, to get rid of this and make this pawn terminally weak. So
Yeah.
that's, and I can even do that with or without taking on d5 first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also threatening this. If I do knight e5 now, I'm threatening to take twice. I'm not saying it's good, but I can grab a pawn. Okay. This pawn is weak. I really like the sequence of takes, and I think you have to take here and then knight e5.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, exactly. Ultimately, white wants to push e4 here still.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this kind of takes the knight away from pushing e3 and then e4.
Mm-hmm.
So the question here is, do we interject, take on d5 first or not? If we do that, I'm not sure. I'm actually prefer to open this file for us. So the line I was looking at would be this, and then knight e5.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we're significantly better.
That is the top line of the engine. So congratulations, Nikola. Your intuition and logical thinking is always performing very well. It was not played that in that way in that move order in the game, but I think this is the best what you have said, to take on d5 first and then knight e5 to expose this c7 pawn. And interestingly, after knight takes e5, I don't know if you were considering this or not, but there may be a different move order here for why that makes sense. What do you think should be also considered here?
Okay, so can we take on c7?
That's the question. Let's calculate.
All right, so if we take on c7, rook c7, actually we can, right?
Yeah.
We can, yeah, we can take.
And if queen takes c7 and let's say knight g6 to protect the queen simply?
Protect the queen, then we are gonna exchange the queens and and then play rook c7 and we're getting a piece.
Yeah, we get the piece back.
Yeah.
Very good job. Knight e5, even if this was not your initial plan, because taking back on e5 is fine too, but white has this tactical motive of intermediate move, queen takes c7, and you will win back the piece. Whether this line that Nikola has just said, rook c7 means the piece back.
Yeah, and
Black will try to win at least this e2 pawn and should try, but we have the pair of bishops and the position has opened up. Rook on the 7th rank. This is looking great even if black wins the pawn back. It's
Yeah.
just all the open files are white. We have the rook on the seventh and the pair of bishops.
Yeah, no, this should be a decisive advantage, I would think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this was a mischance by Miranda. Um, it's interesting that even though the position looks very nice for white, it doesn't feel like there would be a direct way to convert it. Because it still looks very solid, I think, from black's perspective. And it's surprising that this line, capture 95, black cannot do anything about it. C6 is hanging, and then the C7 pawn is the problem in the knight takes E5 line. So this is a forced line, and it was gonna give a really good advantage, perhaps decisive advantage to white in the endgame. But it wasn't played. He played uh, the move knight to E5 without capturing on D5.
Okay.
So let's see now what shall black do after knight E5.
Well, we're not forced to take on e5, right? Immediately. Or are we?
I don't know. Would you want to take? Would you not want to take? How do you see this position? We definitely, at least, are not in that bad forcing line where we drop the c7 pawn.
Okay, so I'm black again. Okay.
Yes, you can flip the board.
Oh, sorry, guys. All right. At least I got lots of practice of flipping the board. Haha.
It's important to get that practice in as well.
Okay, so let me think for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We have some potential switch and sooks here, right? The problem really is that, okay, if we say play something like f6, and we're thinking loud, right? We can exchange, and this thing is still hanging.
Mm-hmm.
And if we allow this capture on c7, this pawn is gonna fall, and then we're all whole kingside. Kingside is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Algorithm55, for the follow. That's very greatly appreciated. Yeah, thanks, Worship. Yeah, I think it's just all right. So what's the main difference between this position and the one we have just seen? It is that there is no immediate threat of taking here. So technically, problem really is that after take on d5, this knight is hanging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but, okay, this is actually a pretty complex variation. Let me think. So let's assume we play knight f6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Takes on d5, takes on e5, bishop takes on e5, knight takes on d5. And we still can't protect this pawn because they can take. And then this pawn falls, and then this bishop is in danger.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't work. So what can we do here? Oh, God. We can play rook c8 to defend, but then we are not. We would need to play rook fc8,
Mm-hmm.
which actually does defend everything.
So rook f8 straight away?
Well, we can probably interject a knight e5 first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. but we basically need to get this knight out of the danger. That's basically the primary task here. So,
Yeah.
all right. We cannot go to d4, we cannot go to b4, we cannot go to a5. This is silly, and this is extremely passive. And this knight is actually dangerous. So this is the knight e5 is a pretty good candidate move. And presumably white is going to take with a bishop. And then do we actually have time to interject f6? And do we want to interject f6? But we don't need to interject f6. We can just play rook c8. And that defends this pawn. Yeah, that kind of works. I mean, we've been playing passive defense from the beginning in this game.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I'll play knight e5.
And then rook f8. And that means you play like the world number 2. Well done. Takes and rook f8 is the best move order. And yeah, it's still very passive and such. But if we recall that this c6 knight was the piece we were trying so hard to regroup, maneuver somewhere else, because it's in the way of our c pawn. We could never push c5. It actually is a bit of a relief that we can trade it without losing material, because it's important that rook f8 happens in the right moment. We are not losing material. Good job. Good job. And knight was too late to take. Well, after this capture, this is well protected. The pawn, can it be taken is a question. Can this be played as white? Would you go for it from white's perspective, Nikola?
That's dangerous. I mean, technically, yes, but it brings all sorts of, let me think for a second, bishop c7.
Let's take a look at this position from black's perspective again. What is it that black should do here? There's no easy continuation. There's no move that wins the bishop, but I think there's something important to notice about this position. So I would like you to think of this a little bit.
Okay. All right. So, you know, I'm going to make a full admission. I've been fantasizing about this from the moment that knight went on f4. It's not working.
But it's a motive. It's good to bear in mind.
On top of it, well, he has bishop f1. It would, if this pawn was e3, we would have something like this, and then no, we wouldn't even then. Forget about that. That doesn't work. Okay. So what is the characteristic of this position that Anna is referring to? Let me think for a second. Queen f6, bishop f4, or f3, and there is nothing there. At least not immediately obvious.
Yeah. Correct.
If we play, yeah, thanks worship, exactly. It's we can. The problem with knight d6 is actually that's not uninteresting, because now the bishop is pinned. So what we can do is play something along the lines of knight d6, and then we are threatening knight c4 to cut this bishop off.
What shall white do after knight d6?
Good question.
Because we are threatening to cut it off, and we are also threatening knight b5 to win the bishop, right?
Correct. Does actually white have a response?
That is the question.
Well, let's look at this. So another option is to take, right? Takes, and black can't go into that line, can it? Because it's going to end
what's
up,
the material count at the
the
end?
material count at the end will be one extra piece for white.
Yes.
Okay. So we would have to take on d6 instead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we are talking about knight d6, bishop takes, queen takes, but this is then a pawn down position with no pin anymore.
Yes, that doesn't work. So I don't think knight d6 actually works. But this pawn is still bishop, and as Sledgehammer is saying, maybe we can play a different. Instead of going to b5, maybe we can go to e8. Then we can play knight f6. And the bishop still has nowhere to go and queen cannot remove itself. And there is no, so that's why basically the line is this. Right.
What is it that white should do after knight f6? Now let's flip the board. After knight f6, how can white escape from losing the bishop?
Okay.
So knight f6.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Interesting. The question is, can white escape from it?
That's a question to Nikola and to our dear viewers. Make sure to think about it. It's not only for Nikola to suffer. You should also try to solve it.
And worship, my dear friend, is exactly right. There is this move.
Yes.
Which saves the day for white.
Saves the day.
Yeah, good spot, worship. That's exactly it. And then
would it be possible that after bishop h3, and even if we end up winning the exchange, that black still ends up winning the bishop too? Like, can black get 2 minor pieces for the rook?
It looks
makes this more complex.
It looks possible. So bishop h3, knight e8. Takes.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, okay, we can draw. So takes, and now what can white do? Nothing. So we're capturing the bishop. And it's a rook and a pawn versus two minor pieces, which is near equality. So this is not a bad line for black, actually.
It doesn't look bad, so let's think of it a little further. I know this is a very lengthy line, but if this was the position and it's white to move, white is losing the bishop, but can white get a bit more than just what they already have?
Well, white can get that pawn on a4.
And the issue is it's a pawn, but also that queen is becoming more active, putting pressure on the e8 knight. So for instance, the line like rook takes,
queen
you
is
have to take with the knight.
That doesn't look pleasant.
What would be, for instance, an unpleasant move here for black?
Okay, we can play something like queen a7.
Yeah, that's very unpleasant. It's really unpleasant. The 7th rank, the pawn, the back rank, so it doesn't give black time to take the pawn on e2. We have gotten the 2 minor pieces for the rook, but it's 2 pawns plus the rook and lots of activity. So unfortunately, black doesn't have time to regroup the pieces and find an outpost for the knight, find an active diagonal for the bishop. It's just too passive at the moment and open position.
Okay. Just a quick shout out to Lila Koridze. She's a fellow.
Hi, Lila.
She's a WFM, and actually she's stronger than a WFM. And a quick shout out, if you're not following her, please give her a follow. Okay, now you're welcome,
So
Lila. All right,
this
so
was the issue. This bishop to h3, very well spotted warship, and everybody else who thought of it, really good job. Which means that that's the threat of white, bishop h3.
okay, so
What does that mean for black's position? What do we need to do?
all right, so do we have time to interject f5?
That's the question.
Okay. The real question is that this bishop is really all right. So if we play f5, you know, white can take on e4.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of an obvious way to avoid the direct threat.
Mm-hmm.
It still keeps that bishop in there. Hey Luigi, thank you for gifting the sub and thank you for paying the forward. That's very greatly appreciated. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for gifting a sub to the Templar Kira. Thanks so much for that.
All right, so the question here is, are we able to play? Can that knight come there in time for this? So let's assume black plays f5, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, f5, that prevents bishop h3. At least it makes it less
Appealing.
scary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we exchange, the bishop is still pinned, but it can't really be taken, at least not immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one option. Does white have a better option?
Good question.
Okay. I don't see a better option for white, to be honest with you. I mean, there is an option to play bishop h3.
Mm-hmm.
And then play g6.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, Temple Killer, thanks. That's very nice to have
Mm-hmm.
your own emoticon. I can relate. All right, so well, this is still pinned. But let me put it this way. I think we almost need to... I don't see a way for white to save the bishop. Thank you, Miss
So it becomes
Instinct.
more problematic, right? What would be another way in which white can bring yet another piece to the defense of that bishop, even if not immediately?
Well, the only piece that can participate in the defense of this bishop is that rook.
Yeah, how could you do that?
So we need to play f3.
Mm-hmm.
And then knight f6, rook d3, rook c3, and we are just in the nick of time.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. So
probably the
somehow to
best
carry
line.
out this maneuver, yeah. Would you go for this line as white if you see that this is you take the pawn, but the bishop on c7 is pinned, and it will take quite some effort to keep it on the board?
I wouldn't. Something tells me that that wasn't what was played.
No, it wasn't, for this very same reason, that this is, even if we don't win the bishop, it's a lot of effort for white to not lose it, and you need to give something for it, either weaken the position with f3, give up the bishop for the knights, and it's not worth it. It's not worth that pawn. So very good job. Better not to take on c7. After the trade on d5, bishop h3 was played immediately, which is a little more unpleasant.
Agreed.
What do we do?
Okay. Well, if we remove the rook, that we then, you know, the white can take with a queen. And then all the pin things, and then pawn on b6 is basically dead.
Mm-hmm.
So we, as Worship is saying, we almost have to sacrifice the exchange here.
Yes, it's time to go for it.
The question is how to extract maximum benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one option is to play f6, and I'm not saying that's the move of choice,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a move. Another option is to play something like knight g5
Mm-hmm.
and maybe reposition that knight into some sort of an attacking posture. We can try to actually play c5,
Mm-hmm.
which is a liberating move, because white cannot actually take because bishop in e5 is not working. Is undefended.
Yeah.
All right. So in this position, I think I'm playing. I think I would probably play c5. I don't see anything better.
Yeah, c5, very good. Because that's a pawn that has always been an issue. We need to give up the exchange. Very good job, everyone, for thinking that it's a must. It's not cool to be an exchange down. This position should be better, if not winning, decisive advantage for white. But this is the lesson that we are here to try to learn from today, to keep on fighting inverse positions or lost positions.
Okay.
So let's see how Fabiano did it in this game.
And to be so this was the game continuation, Anna,
Yeah.
right?
It is the game continuation.
Okay.
Because the other line, if you don't give up the exchange, it's just a pawn down with a rook on the seventh, pair of bishops. So
Yeah.
I think one very important lesson here is that it's better to give up the exchange, give up the exchange, but keep the position complex, than to go for an endgame that's just very one-sided. It's zero chance to mess this up. Basically, it's absolutely very painful to play an endgame like this. Pawn down, pair of bishops, better activity. The rook on the seventh.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I agree wholeheartedly. Okay. On top of it, with once we sacrifice the exchange, that we actually do have all of a sudden this complex, or the right king is weak, and we actually have some counterplay. This bishop after f6 will need to go, and we don't have a thing. And all of a sudden, if at some point we push c4, we have something to play with.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We are hoping that the light squares will be an issue. And there's no more pair of bishops for white, so we have gained something, even if the position is not good for black, but it is something. Oh, actually, by the way, after bishop takes, I think the most natural is to take back with the rook, but Fabiano said, hey, this bishop is not active here, so I may as well take the time to bring the bishop in this direction
Makes sense.
and keep the pawn on a4 guarded. Sorry, I missed that. This was actually an important moment for how to take back on c8.
All right, and just to answer a question to superior triple X, is king plus rook against king plus rook plus bishop win or a draw? Under best play in most positions, it's a draw. It's very hard to play for both sides. There is a lot of rather specific theory that needs to be known, but yes, it should be a draw.
Yeah, but even strong players have lost it. Rook and knight versus rook has also been won, and it shouldn't be the case.
No.
But it has happened. So bishop takes, and now white has played bishop f4. Once again, it's a rapid game, so there was no need to play bishop f4, but I guess he just wanted to make a quick move and make sure that he can take on c5, because that e5 bishop was depending on the d4 pawn. That's why he retreats the bishop.
Okay, so now d5 is under threat, so right, so we need to defend it. So bishop e6 looks like a natural move. Okay.
Yeah, bishop e6 would be natural here.
Okay, and based on what Anna is saying, that wasn't what was played.
It doesn't mean it's not the best, but it's not what Fabiano played.
All right, so Fabiano needs to address this pawn. So he doesn't need to defend this pawn. He can play c4, which might be actually a stronger move. And what else is there? Obviously, the immediate threat is to take, and then take on d5. Or is it a threat? Okay. Maybe not, because then bishop b7 is a little bit dangerous. Okay. You can also play something like bishop f5 to kind of take advantage of this. And I mean, if we're playing Vabank, yeah, Sledgehammer, that's exactly what I was thinking. You can play g5, and I know Anna doesn't like that move.
Well, it may be one of the best options. I'm just saying, we are kind of desperate here.
Yeah, we are kind of desperate. All right, so this is one of those positions when one needs to stop and think. And what we are black, we are down an exchange for a pawn, right? Or hold on, we are actually don't even have a pawn for the exchange. No, so we are down a whole exchange. So we need to attack. Okay. You know what? Since we're attacking, g5 is actually a perfectly fine move. Actually.
Yep. One of the top moves of the engine. And it's g5. g5.
Why not? Okay. So that's another option. An option is c4, which has the disadvantage that it's kind of locking this bishop. At least it prevents any kind of capture. But the thing here, if we capture, that will open up the bishop. I actually like, honestly, you know my style, I will just play g5. And I'm pretty sure Fabiano didn't play it.
He didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
It was perhaps one of the most interesting moves after g5. These complications, if the bishop goes back. We'll still need to address this, of course, but maybe here's c4 and then trying to expand on the king side.
Try to play this like the King's Indian attack. King's Indian
and the position is very closed. Yeah, the rooks are not very useful here just yet because the position is closed.
Yeah, and then we can just push f5, bring the rook over a7, g7, and start attacking the white king. Okay, so that would be my choice. Let me think what Fabiano would play here.
He also went for a tricky line, so he went for some tactical threats and such, in a different way.
Okay. Knight g5.
Knight g5 and moves along that line. Yeah, looking at the king's side, but he wanted to bring more pieces into the attack.
So that's probably too direct. All right. Bishop f5 is probably also too direct.
What would be the line there?
Okay, and thank you, Smash Time Fools. I'm hydrating. All right, so bishop f5 has the advantage of being an immediate threat. And that queen actually doesn't really have a very good place. Actually doesn't have any good places. Interesting. But let me think. So this is taken, this is taken, this is taken, this doesn't make a difference. This is taken, this is defended, this is... Oh, okay. Hey Eric, welcome 2511. Just a quick shout out to 2511, my dear friend and a fellow streamer. Give him a follow if you haven't already. Thanks. All right. So I would bet. So bishop f5 is a very strong move. I don't see any direct counter.
Bishop f5 was played in the game, indeed.
Okay.
So what's going on if this is taken, let's say?
Oof. Okay. If this is taken, yeah, we're gonna take on here,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't know where white is going. Then we're gonna take on, after we take it, we're gonna take on e2. We're gonna capture on c1, and we're gonna be winning.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think white can take on c5.
So your calculation would be,
Okay, let me. So
hmm,
takes. We play takes on g3.
yeah.
Where is the queen going? Okay, where can the queen go? It can. Well, it can go on c3. Would be a very nice move. Queen actually has exactly one spot, actually, which is d2, right? Is there another spot? No. Okay. Well, the question here is e4 doesn't, because we just take. So the response has, so this is the line, knight g3, queen d2, we take, and that's a check. And then depending on where that king goes, we can take on c1, or we can give some nasty checks on this.
Mhm.
I don't think I'm missing any tactics here. So
It's a very complex one. It looks terrible. So I fully understand why white didn't even want to calculate this, because it looks like it's very bad for white. Obviously, if it wasn't the rapid game and white had more time to calculate, this still isn't bad if white plays the most precise move here and then the most precise follow-up after that move. So you need to find the
all right, so we
absolute
need to
only moves. Only
so
moves.
we need to find a couple of engine moves here, basically.
Yes, that
Okay.
is the case. If not, black is winning.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So we have now moved from me trying to find moves by 26 and 27 or 2800 grandmasters to having to find what Stockfish would play. Okay. I'll
Yes.
take it as a compliment. All right. So what I'm hearing is that white has a line that leaves white with an advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Why am I doing all this every time? My bad, guys. And all right, sorry, guys. All right. Okay. All right. So the queen is under attack, and the e2 pawn is under attack. We don't have a convincing queen move, unless I might be seeing. Yeah. If we take, all right, so what is the best? Let's assume for a second that we are ignoring the queen.
Okay.
And I am gonna take on g3, take on c2, take on c2. If we could capture this pawn, then I have to take on c2, takes on d5, and we have a bishop and a rook against queen, and no extra pawns, or one extra pawn. What we can try to do is, can we interject this, enter intermediate move?
Mm-hmm.
That appears to be the line, right? Then what? Okay, let's assume for a second that, sorry guys, we play queen e6. We have all the necessary threats that remain. All right. So we need to find a strong follow-up here. I don't see it. Because, let me put it this way, if we're able to capture this pawn on b6 and exchange queen to do these two pieces, I'll be happily play this position as white. But how do we get there? All right. It stands to reason that this is the first intermediate move.
And if the queen moves, if black moves the queen,
yeah,
let's say to e6, so that I don't let you take on b6 that easily.
So that's the $64,000 question. All right.
Here, the issue is that the queen is hanging at knight e2 fork. It's all coming with the tempo. Is there a way in which you could picture a position where you will not lose to this knight e2? So that is, you don't allow knight e2 to happen. At the same time, you don't lose your queen.
Yeah, I think I see this. All right, so this really is a wide line. Okay, I see the motives. Let me just get them together. I think we need to play e4 at some point. And if it takes with if queen is on so we need to play bishop d6 to get the queen on e6. Then we play e4. If he takes with a pawn, we can play queen a4.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, wait, e4 pawn takes.
Yeah. So if he takes with the bishop, then there is no.
Sorry, I didn't understand the queen a4 part because I was looking. I was. So let's split it out just to make it clear. If it's taken by the pawn, the issue is.
Well, we can't. We need to intercede. I think we need. Well, obviously, this is no longer a threat, right?
Yeah, and not just that it's no longer a threat, but another issue.
We can play queen d2, and then we are. There is. I mean, we can just take the knight on g3, right?
You can take the knight. Yes. So the queen is not hanging anymore. We can take the knight.
But the line I was thinking about was
e4, bishop takes.
e4, bishop takes. And now what? Now we can pin the bishop, right?
Yeah. And that's the solution.
Yeah.
So yeah, it saves us from losing the queen because the other queen is hanging too, and also there's no knight e2. The knight is hanging, and we are threatening f3 if the knight goes away. So this would actually be still a winning position for white, but a mess. And to enter this position in a rapid game, probably they already were down to their final minutes at this stage. Yeah. I can fully understand why this didn't happen in the actual game.
No, I was looking into some line, and I'm just going to actually share it with people, something along the lines of this and then this. But with a motive of using the... doesn't work. Okay. But Jesus, Anna, this is...
I'm sorry, Nikola.
Okay.
Really sorry. Okay. So... it didn't happen in the game, could have happened, but it's a rapid game. Understandable that you don't want to enter these complications, and it's not necessary to allow it. After bishop f5, there's just absolutely no need to take on c5, even if you have a lot of time to think about it. It's too much of a risk. What I also was surprised by, that white ended up playing another move that feels risky, f3, even forcing black into that line. So here we go, complications. Nikola, what's going on?
I'm black now.
Yeah, we better do something about that horsey that's hanging.
All right, so what's the difference between taking on the difference with f3 is that now e4 is a legitimate threat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that we don't really have an answer for, so we can't really take on g3 anymore, right?
That's the question. Can be or can be not.
Okay, so we take on g3. White pushes f4.
Yeah, let's put it on the board because it's a mess.
My apologies.
No worries.
Okay. Oh, Jesus. All right, so this is getting messier by the millisecond.
Welcome to today's lesson.
Okay. Fabiano is supposed to be a positional player. All right, so let's
But
look.
his calculation is also very sharp, and to be
So,
fair, he was in a worse position, so he just wanted to complicate it.
all right, so takes on e4. We take on g3.
Yes, correct.
All right, so isn't that what other options does black have in this position?
That is the question.
Okay. And then you guys wonder why I can recognize when Anna is an imposter when she plays Among Us. I know exactly how she sounds when she says something up her sleeve.
And you are also very good at reading Alessia. Poor Alessia had no chance
Poor
whenever she
Alessia
was an
was actually
imposter.
genuinely mad at me for about a
Yeah.
day and a half. I think Julian and I can understand, can read that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
25 and Nikola is the imposter. Yeah, I bet.
Thanks. I was only imposter once.
Did you see, by the way, Nikola, the glitch I had on my stream about you when you
No?
were killed? Oh, I'll need to show you
Oh
sometime
yes,
that
you
clip.
showed me. I was killed, but I was somehow
Yeah.
alive on your stream.
And for the full game, so I thought you were the imposter because I saw the vent moving. It was a glitch in the game, guys. If you didn't see it, Nikola and I were playing with other chess streamers and the chess community,
Sure.
and the vent moved next to Nikola. So I ran to call an emergency meeting, and I even felt bad that I will have to report Nikola because
No,
this
that's
was one
fine.
of the first games you played with us. And then it turned out the people told me, how could he be the imposter? He's dead. Like, you were killed in that game, but for me, he appeared, his character appeared just like a normal person, not a ghost, a normal character. So I was sure it was him, but for the rest of the game, I could see him. And only on my screen I could see him. It was so strange.
Okay, so I actually have Nikki had an apology video because she said she would never kill me, and I'm gonna post the link for you guys. Nikki. So she basically did an apology video on YouTube. For the record, she said, "I will never kill you," and she like killed me like 3 or 4 times. So anyway, that's fine. That's all part of the game. All right, so. Truth be told, I'm actually so bad at Among Us. It was actually a pleasure for me to watch Eric Rosen play for the first time because he was almost as bad as me. But I have one thing is that I can pick up voices.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. So, all right. So we cannot take. So what can we do here? Right.
That's the question. So both the bishop and the knight are hanging. How can we save one of the pieces at least? Well, ideally both, but one at a time. One at a time.
Okay. Well, we always have an option of playing, counter playing knight h5 because I'm not sure that this and then follow up here works. It doesn't. Though, hold on a second. Yeah, but this, yeah, if we do this, it falls to rook c2, so that doesn't work. Okay. Knight e2 doesn't work because white just takes. Taking with and sacrificing the knight for 2 pawns on e4 is probably too optimistic. We don't have enough firepower for that. So I think we do have to play knight h5, right?
Yeah, knight h5 is the only move because both minor pieces are hanging, so we need to make sure at least we get a piece as well in case of the capture on f5, knight takes f4. And that position actually would be really promising for black again because we are threatening the same fork as well as knight h3, queen g5, queen e3, lots of threats suddenly. So this would be good. Knight h5 was played in the game, of course, by Fabiano. White played bishop g3. And here, after bishop g3, Fabiano ended up. Actually, I'll ask you what would you play, but it's not too difficult to figure out.
What I would play here is black.
Yes.
I can just I can take on e4. I can take on e4. I can push the bishop to h3. I can actually take on g3. What's the best move? Best move is probably taking here.
Yeah, taking the pawn because that keeps weakening the king of white as well, and that's our target. Whether white takes back, white can take on c5 or white can take back. In both cases, we take the e4 pawn, and if rook e1, which happened in the game.
Okay. Well, we can even play this. We can also. I'm not sure I want to open up this diagonal, but that's also a possibility. I think just this rook has been on a8 throughout the game. I think just playing this is perfectly fine.
Yeah, rook 8 is the best move. That would have been the strongest here. Fabiano played f5, which also saves the bishop, but it weakens the king a little bit. But it's still a very unclear position. So from a decisive advantage for white, but no clear win, this has become very messy. This is now anybody's game again.
Yeah, this actually looks almost better for black, to be honest with you.
Yeah. What would you play? How would you continue, Nikola? If you want to continue attacking.
Well, I can play something along the lines of can I play f4? I can't play f4, too bad. I can play rook e8 again, and then the idea of playing f4.
Yeah.
I can take here. I can play queen g5. I think the best move in this is to just play rook e8. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Rook e8, or what happened in the game. Similar idea. Get out of the pin. Threaten on g3s. Not a winning move because there's defense, of course, but just to keep putting pressure on white.
Yeah. Not to mention that now, these two pawns are really being controlled by this pawn, and let's assume that these two pawns are going to exchange themselves. I mean, I wouldn't want to play the end game and exchange down, but two rooks versus rook and bishop in this end game might actually be holdable for black.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Queen f2 was played because obviously the queen was hanging and white also wants to protect g3. Now Fabiano took on c5 before that pawn lands on b6. It better capture it.
Yeah.
Now what's next? What do you think would be a way to continue?
I would plan on pushing f4, right?
Can we execute that plan somehow, or can we go for
Well,
something else?
we cannot do it now, but that's hanging. Obviously, we need to take the queen out of the pin.
Mm-hmm.
We can also, I think, potentially we can play something like queen g4.
Mm-hmm.
And white doesn't have much in terms of a counterplay, but that counterplay can develop rather quickly.
Yeah, true. So we don't have that much time, right?
Yeah. So, and on top of it, this bishop is also a little questionable there, though it's perfectly defended. Okay, so
Queen g4 was indeed the choice of Fabiano. Another interesting option would be when to take. If we take, because if the h-pawn takes back, then we have chances about threatening queen h1, force white go queen h2, then maybe come back now to g6 or b6. There are lots of ideas to use the diagonals. And if queen takes, of course, queen trade may not be what we want, but just to infiltrate the position of white. So there were chances here after taking, or what he played, immediate queen g4. Now white has played, I think, the best defense. What do you think would be a strong defensive move here when it comes to simplifying the position?
Okay. All right, so I'm going to flip the board and let me think for a second. I think we have a couple of options. So another option is, it would be nice if we could play rook e3 to eliminate that variation we have just seen. You know, the queen d1, we can just return the rook. So that's a pretty strong candidate move. I'm not sure I want to go and just return the sacrifice. And, you know, worship is basically saying we can play rook c7, which is a perfectly fine move. Give us a little bit of counterplay.
Yeah. True.
Okay. We can even play rook c1 with an idea of generating some counterplay. And finally, we can also say, all right, I'm going to just play rook c3 here. And the idea being, after, if white plays f4, we can take on e4 and then exchange here, take with the rook.
Yeah, so, something along the lines of activating the rooks for sure. And when it comes to the queens, what do you think? If white plays queen e2, is black interested in the trade?
No.
So what happens if black plays queen to h3 instead, to not trade queens?
That's not a good idea, I would think.
And why is it not a good idea?
Queen c4, king has to go here, rook c8, queen c8, then when I don't know where king goes, and all of a sudden, you know, we have some checks and maybe a potential counterplay.
Can you see even a mate after queen h3, queen c4 check?
Okay, yeah, I do see it. So yeah, I see it. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so let's see, Queen C4,
Mm-hmm.
King H8 is immediate loss, so it's this. We give a check here. Thank you, DNA 2006. So I'll drink some water.
Hmm.
Rook D6, Queen E8, and all right, so it has to go to E8, right? And after that, we can probably, can we take on E4? Do we need to take on E4? You
What's the
know,
fastest mate after
and
bishop
the
d6,
fastest
king
mate
e8?
is Queen G8, King D7, Rook D1 is mate, I would think.
Where's the bishop?
Bishop is on D6.
So is rook d1
No,
a
Rook
mate?
D1 is not a check. So, but Rook Queen. All right. Yeah, I see it. It's just a question of nailing the last thing. There is definitely a mate.
Yeah, no, and it's enough to start giving those checks, and then it will be obvious once you
No,
get
it's
this
fine.
position. I
It's
think
fine.
it's obvious the mate in two. Will that be with queen g8, or is there something even
Oh,
faster?
Queen E6 is faster.
Queen e6
Yeah,
faster,
yeah.
mate in two. Yeah, so this is the issue, unfortunately, with queen g4. That queen e2 is a really strong move because even though black wants to keep the queens on the board, if we do keep the queens on the board, it is the black king that ends up being checkmated. So Fabiano would love to keep it on the board, but he has to trade. And now the advantage is back on white's side. Without
Sorry. I'll.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you need to take it, so I was gonna
No, no,
continue
I don't need to
the
take it. It's
thought
fine.
process. Sure. So this is the issue. And it was a rapid game. I'm sure that if it was classical game, Fabiano would have realized that he doesn't have time for Queen G4 here, but maybe he should have taken on G3 and played Queen H6. And this is unclear. This position is a mess. But unfortunately for Black, after Queen G4, Queen E2 is really strong. Miranda played it, and Fabiano is forced to trade queens. So it's an exchange down endgame, but it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless because black has very active pieces and a pawn for the exchange. So, how do we approach this position? What would you play here, Nikola?
Okay, I'm white.
Nope, we're playing with the black pieces. You're on exchange down.
Okay, very good. Okay. The question number one is, are we? All right. So we cannot keep on attacking because we don't hear. The question is, are we taking on G3 or not?
Mm-hmm. That's the most important question here.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not in immediate danger of losing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in an immediate danger of being mated, but I cannot allow that pawn on a4. So problem is that my king is all of a sudden in more danger than the white king.
Yeah.
All right. So the problem is I have this passed pawn that I can't take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, Anna, this is the type of the end game that I actually have trouble with.
I'm glad. I'm very glad.
All right, so this thing here has been completely passive forever.
Mm-hmm.
So I can play rook d8 or try to activate it. It'd be nice if I could play rook b8. The issue here is that I have this rook c7. That's a little bit on the nasty side. Okay, another option is to exchange,
Mm-hmm.
but then I don't have a passed pawn anymore.
Yeah. When it comes to deciding whether to trade or not, one thing to bear in mind, of course, is the passed pawn. The other is, how do you see those minor pieces? How do they compare? The dark squared bishop of white in comparison to your knight.
Well, the knight is now in a. Oh, it's weaker than the bishop
Yeah.
because it's there, and on top of it, this is now an open position in which knight is weak.
Yeah. And
So,
unfortunately, that bishop is also heading toward even
yeah,
more active
yeah,
positions.
yeah. Goodbye, DNA 2006 TG. Thank you for joining us. It was very good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we're taking on G3, Anna, then, right?
Yeah, we need to. We need to. We will not have a pass pawn, but we hope in the future, this 3 versus 1, we will be able to create one. For now, at least, we got rid of that important bishop of white, and we still have our bishop on e4 well supported. So that's something that gives us hope.
All right, so the question here is how do we activate the rook on a8 without sacrificing the pawn on a4?
Yeah, true.
So playing something too direct, like rook b8, will result in rook a5, and
Yeah.
that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can play rook d8, or maybe even better yet, get our king off the edge, like king f7.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this is one move, another is this. And I don't see any other candidate moves. This bishop is strong where it is. We can't really get it to defend any pawn, the a4 pawn. Okay.
Yeah, those are some of the main moves, as you said. I think those are good options. Also, you can bring the rook through the sixth rank to try to target the pawn or make it to the h5 and still keep an eye on the a4 pawn. Fabiano played h5 first to still keep
Yeah.
his pawn protected, and at the same time he's getting ready to keep the structure fixed, because with only the f5 pawn guarding the bishop, there's an
There's a
option of white to
g4 option.
push
Yeah.
g4. So he stops it by playing h5, and after rook d2, this is the moment when he brings the rook through the sixth rank, so still protecting the pawn and trying to make it to the king side. After rook a6, king f2 was played. I'm just gonna play some of these moves because there are plenty of options. Interestingly, king h7 is one of the best moves here, and not king f7. We tend to go toward the center. Usually that's the good way to go in endgames, but here versus those two rooks, it's too exposed for the king to
Yeah.
step into those checks.
Makes
So king
sense.
h7 hides the king, and even if white will end up doubling on the seventh rank, we in worst case we have rook g6 protecting that pawn and then trying to attack at the same time. If we get to a position like that, after king h7, rook c4 was played, white wants to make sure this rook is glued onto the a pawn. So Fabiano said, I'm just going to continue activating
Yeah.
my king through the h5, king h6, rook d to d4. Now the pawn is going to be lost unless we go very passive, but this would lose the bishop, so there's no way of keeping it. So if we cannot keep the a pawn, what shall we do
Rook
in order
b6. We have
to...
to play rook b6, right?
Exactly, we need to get another pawn for it. Rook b6, very logical. And after rook b4, how do we continue? Do you exchange rooks by principle when it's an exchange down position?
We normally know, right? That's you normally want to keep the rook because without it you don't have a control over the opposite squares.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, very important. In general, that's the principle.
Okay, so we have here a couple of options. One is to play rook c6, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then threaten to check on c2 and take the pawn. And I think that's actually the best move in the position.
Yeah. Rook c6. You gotta keep the rook on the board and you gotta keep it active. Very good job.
Yeah.
Rook c6. Now white played rook dc4. So what do we do?
Well, we keep up the good work and then we play rook d6.
Indeed. So white followed. Rook d4. We go.
Then we can go back to c6, right?
Yeah, and this is something that sometimes is difficult to make peace with, especially if you're the higher rated player, is that there's a limit to how much you can risk. And here, if black doesn't repeat, you'll just end up losing the a4 pawn, or you end up exchanging the rooks, and you don't want either. So it doesn't make sense to take that much risk where you almost have no chance of winning, and it's most likely that the
Yeah.
end game is just lost. So hoping for a miracle there that the opponent blunders is not the best way to go. But Fabiano did here, I think, is very instructive that he kept repeating because he's in a worse position. So white has the pressure whether to decide, will I take a draw against the world number two, which is a good result, but the position is better for white. So by principle, you should keep playing as white. How many times will you get a better position against Fabiano? So I guess white wanted to take this chance. He ends up playing this move, and now to not repeat, he went back to d2. But this means that now the position has completely changed, and it gives black a chance to activate his pieces even further. Which move would you look at in Nikola in this position?
Okay, so here we have. I mean, we don't want to play rook a6, right? Because it's fairly passive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we can play something like rook b3.
Very good. Very active move, and we
Yeah.
don't mind that this pawn will be taken because then we have rook f3 check, and the g3 pawn will fall, or you
Yeah.
have to step into a discover check. Excellent move. White play rook c3. Fabiano comes back because we want to keep the rook on the board. King e3 was played, and now he just kept activating his king, heading toward g4. These are all very instructive moves, I think. After rook d7, this is an issue, but you can simply push the pawn and then follow up with that idea of making it to g4 with the king. Very active play by black. White went back to d2. I'm pretty sure they were down to their final seconds here, so it's already just a practical game where the engine says it's 0-0-0, this end game, but I think in a practical game, I don't know how about you, Nikola, but I would definitely prefer playing this already from black's perspective with such active pieces in a
Yeah.
blitz game.
Yeah.
And
This
it's
is.
normal, I think, that black ends up making progress, activating the king, and now he pushes g5. This is what you said. If once we have the pass pawn, black has really good chances of winning even. So from not repeating in that position with the rooks, I think that was the last mistake of white. Even if this position is still equal according to the engine, I think in a practical game, it's so difficult, even if it's not Fabiano who is your opponent, because white is passive. White has two rooks, but is very passive.
Yes. No,
I'll
this
show you
is.
the end, but this I think is already not that much of a. Um, it wasn't going to be that much part of the lesson because I think the mistake was just not agreeing to that repetition there, and white took the extra risk because white was better, but it wasn't easy to convert anymore. Rook h6 now by Fabiano, supporting the passed pawn. Rook g8, king f4. Black is extremely active.
Yeah. And
uh,
that pawn is almost very difficult to stop.
yeah. I'll just play out the final moves of the game. Rook h8,
Ouch. Yeah.
king f3, and after king f3, rook f2, king e3.
Mm-hmm.
This is still a draw, but the only move here to defend is rook f1. I don't think this is obvious that you have to play rook f1
No,
here. You
it's
can't
not.
just take the pawn or anything. You
But
can't
if
take
you
the pawn
take the
because of
pawn,
the,
you are in. Yeah.
yeah, this tactics
Yes.
and mate in the end. So he didn't find rook f1, which was the only defensive move, but ended up taking the pawn. And after king f1, bishop d3. This is the final position in the game.
Incidentally, guys, if you play bishop versus rook and bishop versus rook,
Yeah,
this is one of the topical motives with this check on d3 and the king on e3. That's
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and it came up as a question earlier in the chat. Interesting.
yeah.
What did you think of this
Okay.
game, Nikola, and what were some of the most instructive parts for you?
Well, all right. Let me go to the beginning. Something needs to be said about this opening, this knight c6. Okay, if I played knight d6 back 40 years ago in Belgrade, they would kick me. You know, anybody who knows a little chess would give me a huge lecture that that's not a good move.
Yeah.
This was. Thank you. That's good to. Thank you. That's good to know. Superior turtle. That's. This is very un-Fabiano style.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always perceived him as a positional player.
Giving up the exchange was very important there to keep the position complex even in a reverse position. Thanks, worship.
Thanks. Thanks, worship. Okay, so yeah, all right. So taking on g3 was good, and I think white didn't play this end game. Even here, it's
yeah, it's not easy. But even if he goes for the 7th rank attack, I don't think that was in time because the b2 pawn was gonna be attacked too. So black always had, I think, some counterplay, and not repeating moves is maybe what the engine would still agree with, because here it says still about, I think, 0.70 or 0.80 for white as an advantage, but in a practical game, I don't know. I don't think it's actually still an advantage. Maybe not an advantage. It's not clear. I think the issue is that it's way easier for black to make progress than for white to make progress here.
Yes, and even here, just even taking on a4 and having some counterplay and even facing those three passed pawns would have been a better choice than this.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. To somewhere decide that I give up the b2 pawn for the a4 pawn, but at least I have a passed pawn.
Okay. All right. Great game, Anna. Thank you so much. This was a very interesting experience. And this was actually, I have to admit, slightly less torturous than it usually is. Don't tell Anna. So thank you so much. All right. So just a couple of program announcements. We'll announce our next lesson because next week Anna is basically busy commentating the
US Championship.
The US Championship, so we're probably gonna. There might be me without Anna or something, and we'll post it in Discourse and an announcements on my Twitter, and we'll have some fun times thereafter. Now the most important question is, who are we going to raid? Let's see. All right. I'm actually going to send you guys to WGM Adriana. She's a small Bulgarian streamer. She just recently started streaming. She's playing a sub battle against Rosen, Eric Rosen, and I think she would really like that. And I played a match against her and I managed to survive barely. So raid is on your way. Thank you again. Thank you always. Thank you for all support. Thank you for being here, and I will see you guys soon. My next match is on Sunday against the one and only WFM Alessia Santeramo, and the big thing is that if she loses, she has to sing the song by one and only David Hasselhoff. Bye,
I can't
guys.
wait. Can't wait for that. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
I need to find the right song for Alessia. I'm gonna think.